Hello and welcome to a special edition of Liberty Nation's Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Allen's economics correspondent. Each week, I dive into the moors of top economic news stories and fish out compelling narratives, or I retrieve fallacies that have been accepted as conventional wisdom by the swamp creatures for years. This week, modern monetary theory, Frankenstein's monster. It is bedlam in America. President Joe Biden is going on a multi-trillion-dollar spending spree. The government is developing COVID passports, and many progressive goodies could be installed before the midterm elections. The left is indeed exploiting the pandemonium in the pandemic, with leftists enrolling in Rahm Emanuel's school of thought of never letting a crisis go to waste. But what about the latest monster from Frankenstein's school of economics? The newest craze among the big government acolytes and mad money printers is the modern monetary theory. Stephanie Kelton, an economist and economic advisor to the Bernie Sanders campaign, recently published a book titled The Deficit Myth, which champions the MMT concept. She has appeared across the media landscape, from MSNBC to the New York Times, espousing the virtues of MMT. Critics like Mises Institute President Jeff Diaz said that it is not modern, it is not monetary, and it is not a theory. To help us dive deeper into the world of MMT, please welcome my guest, Mr. Robert Wenzel, the editor and publisher of the Economic Policy Journal and Target Liberty, and author of Problems with Modern Monetary Theory, a comment on Stephanie Kelton's The Deficit Myth. Thank you for coming onto the program, Mr. Wenzel.
Hey, Andrew, good to be with you.
So let's get started here. For those who are unfamiliar with the concept or the various policy battles, how could the MMT be best described to the layman? And why should people oppose the idea?
The best way to understand it, it's a idea that you can basically print money, and therefore you don't need to tax people. You don't need to do anything to generate revenue for government to pay for goods and services and whatever other activities they want to spend money on. That the Fed, in the case of the United States, the Federal Reserve can just print any money they want. And technically that's true. The Federal Reserve can just print money. It does all the time. Last year, it printed a remarkable $4 trillion, which increased the money supply by 26%. And but that doesn't create any goods and services. It's an error to think that somehow creates a boom in the economy. It just creates more money in people's pocketbooks, and not everybody gets the same amount of money at the same time. So it benefits some people at the expense of others.
So as you said, it seems that MMT is about printing money limitlessly whenever some progressive scheme is being submitted. So how is it different from what is currently going on in Washington today when the Federal Reserve is creating trillions of dollars out of thin air?
Well, really, they are on a de facto modern monetary money printing program. There's no question about it. That's what they're doing. Any money the Treasury is spending to finance all the programs, which actually started last year in the Trump administration, the Fed is buying up the Treasury bills. They're also doing some other complex maneuvers with a Treasury balance that will add another $1 trillion, and they're doing things with SDRs internationally to add $650 billion that way. It's really insane. Now, this latest program, the infrastructure program that President Biden has just announced, he's also linking tax increases with that. And basically, that's sort of going against modern monetary theory there. But the Federal Reserve in its printing is doing it. And then there's a whole question of how much taxation, how much revenue will they really bring in relative to how much spending in this new infrastructure program. And therefore, you'll probably see more money printing because of that. And Stephanie Kelton just came out yesterday, the gal who wrote the book you mentioned, calling for even greater infrastructure spending. So this is all about mad money spending when the government doesn't have any money and they're just printing it out of thin air.
So it's clear that the exploding budget deficit does not matter to either Republicans or Democrats. And one of the main selling points of the MMT is that deficits don't matter. So this is at the very minimum honest. and it would make it the official stance of Washington politics. And alluding to what you said, if leading red ink each fiscal year is the case, then why not cancel taxation and simply print more money to cover the spending? And also, does MMT reject the history of inflation?
Yeah, well, the key is to understand what they really mean by deficits don't matter in the real situation. What they're saying is there's no impact if the government can just do that, and there's an implication. They don't really come out and say it, but the implication is that it has no negative impacts. Well, it has a number of negative impacts. The first one, and no one really emphasizes this at all, is when the government is spending money and there's no increases in government in expansion of products and services throughout the economy. The government is taking money away from the private sector. It's taking goods and services away and putting them into whatever programs they desire. And it tends to be much more bureaucratic and inefficient, and doesn't really suggest an increase in standard of living. It suggests the exact opposite, and that's extremely, extremely dangerous. But the further problem is that there's a distortion in the economy. Whenever government is spending money, it is taking it away from somewhere else through this money printing that goes into some people's pockets at a greater amount than everybody else. I mean, they're paying people now. They're giving them $1,600 here, $400 checks there. But if you look at the full amount of money that is being printed, a lot of it is going into other sectors, which are very, very close to the cronies that are close to the central power. And so it's really helping people that are close to the government, to the people in power, which is very, very bad because it's taking from us, because they're bidding for the same goods and services we are, but they have more money to bid with. So they're taking goods and services away from us. It's something that takes 2 or 3 steps of thought to understand, but that is extremely, extremely dangerous. Then the other problem is eventually you print enough money and you're going to get an inflation. Now, the MMTers don't see any problem now with the incredible amount of money that's being printed. I don't think the government the Federal Reserve should be printing any money, never mind the trillions that they are. But MMTers say, hey, the government can print any money if there's no inflation, no problem. Well, there is a problem because it's distortion. It's giving it to people, but that momentum for the inflation is really building up underneath. And I think we're going to see a tremendous inflation probably starting in just a few months from now.
So one thing I'm curious is your thoughts on the school behind the MMT. A common theme that I found among the MMT crowd are they're stuck on this idea that deficit spending is a boon for the economy. So is the MMT an expansion from the Keynesian school, or is it some rogue Marxist doctrine?
Well, there's elements of Keynesianism to this, and for those who don't know, the Keynesian idea is that labor markets are sticky downward. And therefore, because they're sticky downward, you have to print money, so you boost the wages so people go back to work. But if you think about it, the Keynesian theory is really the idea that people would rather starve than take whatever the current market labor wage is. I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. No one is going to starve if there's some kind of wage out there that at least put food on their table. And we're not in any kind of situation at all now where there's a problem with unemployment that isn't caused by lockdowns and government regulations. If you were to remove those regulations, you would end the unemployment problem. You would just have what is called frictional unemployment, when people are looking for new jobs and somebody gets fired because they're not doing a good job. But supply and demand works. Markets clear, and that also works for wage markets, jobs markets. There's no problem with this unemployment. If you look at all the situations where there's large amounts of unemployment, there's usually a very, very good explanation for it with regard to say minimum wage laws, which hurt youth, especially urban youth, as far as getting a job, because they're just eliminated from taking the job where their productivity, where they have low productivity, so that you can't really pay them whatever the minimum wage is. And occasionally you'll have a bubble up in unemployment, but that's because of the business cycle, and that's just the Federal Reserve stopping printing money for a while and some of the distortions clear up. So it's a mess that the theory makes no sense at all. No one is going to starve, not take a wage that can buy them food and starve instead. But that's the real essence of Keynesian theory, and MMT basis is on that. But they go beyond that. They're much more socialistic. They're much more in favor of government control of the economy across the board. And Keynes there were some indications he favored socialism in certain ways, but he was never as aggressively open in advocating of it the way the MMT years are.
So my final question before we finish off here, considering that common sense restraints might prevent the federal government from implementing universal health care, a basic income guarantee, or the Green New Deal, do you think there would be an appetite for making this grandiose something from nothing the official policy of the United States?
Well, they'll try. The problem is they're going to bump up against reality. They're spending so much money now that it's going to be out of control in a very, very short period of time. I really believe the inflation is going to heat up much more than the Federal Reserve expects. They think it's going to go just a little bit above 2%. I expect it to go easily to 3%. That they say, I publish an alert investment letter, and I say that's in the bag, the 3%. 5% looks like a very, very strong possibility, at least towards the end of the year. And if they really, really fumble it, I think within 18 months, 10% inflation is not out of the question. It's a mess. They're creating a mess. It's gonna turn out bad. So that may, in a sense, put a stop on any attempts at these grandiose social programs. But you never know with these guys. They're not working with logic.
Like the universal basic income, the MMT has a diehard following. Perhaps an Andrew Yang type of presidential candidate will rise up in the next few years and champion modern monetary theory on the debate stage the way forward. So that's it this week. I'd like to thank Mr. Robert Wenzel for appearing on Liberty Nation Swamponomics videocast. You can read his work at economicpolicyjournal.com and targetliberty.com and listen to his podcast, This Week in Economics with Robert Wenzel. You can also check out our 3-part interview a couple of years ago discussing his latest book, The Foundations of a Private Property Society. Be sure to read my full Swamponomics column, where I strap on my hazmat suit and dive into the swamp to retrieve a modicum of economic insight. Thank you very much.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.